Welcome to a Trekzone conversation. Matt Miller with you in Studio 4. Looking forward to today's guest, Daniel Zaccario, who's going to be joining me. Now, you may not recognise the name, but you'll certainly know his work. He is the founder and the creator of Supanova, the pop culture expo here in Australia. Let's dive into the opener and have a chat with him.
On Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube for over 550 episodes. This is a Trekzone conversation.
And Daniel, it's a real thrill to have you on board Trekzone for this episode. I really appreciate a little bit of your time this afternoon.
No problem at all, Matt.
Now tell us a little bit about Supanova, where it all got started.
In Sydney, we basically started a convention in 2000 called Comic Fest, and that developed into something that we're having a lot of fun with, but we found that the name was limited in its scope, and we were getting pushback from companies just based off the brand name. And so in 2002, we decided, hey, let's call it something else. What can we call it? And came up with Supanova while driving around the car with my brother. And we checked out online to find out whether Supanova.com was taken. It was. Supanova.com.au was taken. Thought we'd change the spelling a bit. Supanova.com was taken, but Supanova.com.au was not taken. And suddenly we had a name. And then a year later, in September, we took it to Brisbane for the first time on the road, and I guess we've been growing ever since.
It is absolutely incredible that Supanova really has become part of the Australian landscape with Comic-Cons and pop culture expos as well. But it's and as you're saying there with Comic Fest, it's more than just comics and the pop culture. It really is about the science and bringing like-minded people together to have a bit of fun over a weekend until the pandemic, and we'll get into that in a second. But bringing people together and seeing all that, what's it like for you to see all the people that come out for the show every weekend in each of the cities that you bring it to?
I have to say it's my biggest joy is knowing that when, especially on a Saturday morning, even if we have preview nights and Friday openings, Saturday morning, seeing when we have our biggest crowd and all the faces excited to get in pre-opening at 10 o'clock and just seeing them all amassing out there in their costumes and families and friends and stuff. I mean, that's the thing that's my like hero moment personally, that we've worked hard to bring a convention together, that we've advertised it, promoted it, developed it, and then there are the fans waiting to come in and have an amazing weekend. And yeah, like I said, that's my hero moment, and that's the little, I guess, 14 and 15-year-old in me that's like squealing, or squeeing or whatever you want to say, on the inside, that fell in love with comic books, fell in love with Star Wars, fell in love with Dungeons and Dragons and afternoon cartoons and Doctor Who and all that sort of stuff, and is then able to present this convention to that starry-eyed lad once more.
And what's it like for you? In a little bit of research that I've done, you're a fan as well. So it's not just you being an event organizer putting this thing on for people that are enjoying it. You yourself are a fan and get to bring out some pretty cool, or were able pre-COVID to bring out some pretty big names in the industry, in the fandoms that everyone enjoys, including yourself. What's that like to be able to just get these people out, I guess, as a first point?
Look, it really is a privilege, and it's an amazing thing. I've missed out on a couple of people that I would have loved to have, hosted. That hasn't worked out, but there's a whole lot of other people that I have. And like even now, in COVID, we're blessed to have some amazingly talented people here in Australia. So we're still going to be hosting some really cool people coming up on the Gold Coast, and then later in Melbourne and Sydney, Perth, hopefully, all things going equal. But it is a privilege. I think hosting Stan Lee was amazing. A personal one for me, Walt Simonson, happened all the way back in 2001, was still Comic Fest. The first Brisbane Supanova had David Prowse and Peter Mayhew there together, Chewbacca and Darth Vader, of course. and the hits just keep on coming. Really, I've been very blessed.
And how do you come up with who to bring out for each convention? Obviously, running across the cities, keeping them close together, a couple close together, so that you can bring guests for different conventions. But what's the sort of thought process to get people out to the conventions?
Well, there's a couple of different factors. Of clearly, availability is a big one. So people who are willing and able to. A lot of stars they don't make themselves available, and then there's a lot that are committed to other projects and therefore are unavailable. And then there's people who price themselves out of availability. So availability is a big one. And then, but the other big factor is, of course, is looking at the fandom and saying, all right, well, how many people are we going to excite by this name? And my main focus as the event director is always to try and get as big a personality that's going to make as many people happy as possible. Sure, there's a profit motive in there as well, because we need to keep making money so that we can keep putting on these events. I've got a lot of staff and overheads to just like any business in manage it and that. But of course, if we can bring the right personality out, well, we're obviously making a lot of people happy, and that's the number one motivation. Typically, is bringing out as popular a person as we can find, so that we can make as many people as happy as possible.
Well, the incredible thing for Trekzone, we've been podcasting since 2013. In fact, our very first podcast, and we've got a series here podcasting 7 days a week called That Time When. Looking back on the archive of Trekzone, there's a lot of guests from Supanova and the other convention, Oz Comic Con as well here in Australia. But Supanova, especially for us, has always been there as our go-to way of getting to interview the stars and the people that you bring out, which is absolutely fantastic. And this week on That Time When was when Anthony Montgomery, of course, Travis Mayweather
Anthony.
on Star Trek Enterprise. He was here in 2013 for the Perth convention. So we managed to sit down with him in our very first podcast. So Supanova's been a part of Trekzone podcasting, and I'm so appreciative of that. And I can't believe that this is the first time that we're chatting with you. I guess my next question really is the times that we're living in at the moment, Daniel. How has COVID altered Supanova?
Yeah, well, I think in a lot of different ways, really. Look, we're obviously, for the first time in history, we need government approval, first of all, to be able to run. Previously, we negotiated a fee with the venue and the dates, and if we could both agree to work together for the price that was negotiated for the space and for the dates that we wanted to run, that was what the terms and conditions are. These days, we need government sign-off. We need to know. They need to know that our COVID safety plans are to their liking and to their level of satisfaction. And of course, there are going to be things that are going to be happening and not happening at the convention because of that. For the first time, probably in about 15 years, we're not going to have wrestling as part of what we do, because it tends to be a magnet to bring people closely together on the show floor, and it's harder to maintain social distance. Look, we're very blessed in Australia that realistically, outside of the aged care situation that happened in Victoria and the very first wave that occurred, back in March, April last year, we've only had 4 other people die across the whole of Australia since the middle of May. So so we know that it's not a death sentence here, but at the same time, you've got to be careful so that it doesn't spread, and we need to do our due diligence for that. So as part of that safety, we're going to have a few rules that are going to be applied, but in general, we'd like to think that just like you can go to a shopping centre and go do shopping and walk around, and sure, there's some things that you've got to sort of like there's a protocols that you've got to go through, etc. Well, we're going to have some like that at Supanova, where they're going to be more like soft things rather than oppressive things, as far as just helping manage people and for the personal sort of mental and health of people to know that they're being looked after as well by us, and that we're not being careless. And, if we can do that, I think we can have a very successful show, and we can also have a lot of very happy fans.
And in terms of the big name stars that Supanova uses to bring out and really promote the con and get a lot of people through the door, how has that changed for you? Obviously, international travel's really restricted now, so bringing people over from, say, The Mandalorian would be fantastic. Marvel going through the big growth spurt at the moment with Disney Plus, perfect opportunity for some of these celebrities to come out, but unfortunately can't make that happen. How does that sort of change your plans, and where do you go to fill out the superstar roster?
Look, we're going to have more people announced over the next week, which we're very excited about. The thing is about Australia, there's lots of talent here. So I think the biggest trick for us is convincing people who normally don't do conventions to do them, and that it's something that they see as a viable decision to do. And I think that's a changing thing in the industry. When you've got people like Chris Hemsworth, who's very happy to do conventions, and we hosted him in 2017, when you've got him leading the way and saying, hey, look, it's cool to do these things. It's just, basically letting fans celebrate with you the amazing, pop culture sort of world that we inhabit. I think that leadership is very helpful. But over time, we'll just have to see who's available and who's not available as far as, that's concerned. The problem with international right now isn't so much as, well, it's the 2 weeks quarantine, because for what we can afford to pay someone to come to Australia, to then have them spend 2 weeks in quarantine, it's not just the expense of the quarantine, but the expense of their time that goes along with that. So usually when we get a guest, it's for 2 weekends back to back, and we do put the conventions together for that very reason, so that we can basically combine 2 paychecks into one and say, hey, we'll give you a little bit of a mini holiday in Australia in between the shows, and that works out really fine. And I think we're great ambassadors for Australia because of that. People go back overseas and say what an amazing experience they've had at Supanova, because not only do they get a great professional experience at the conventions, where, and we've got some of the best fans in the world, and they tell us so, but then they get to experience a bit of one city before then flying to the other city midweek and seeing a bit of that there as well. And then they fly back home happy, having done that. So it's sort of a working holiday. Putting 2 weeks quarantine into the mix, though, is very difficult. And I personally know that I would go insane or close to insane, having to be in a square box for 2 weeks, and you'd have to be paying me a fair bit of money to do that. So I understand. And not only that, but on top of that, you need to get an exemption from the government to where you have to explain to them why that person in that quarantine is irreplaceable by any other local person or equivalent for it to be justified as well. So there's a lot of factors. So right now we've got plenty of Australian talent that we're looking to, that we've booked, and we'll be slowly revealing that, and we'll be, of course, seeking further opportunities as we go later into the year as well.
Well, another interesting sticking point, I guess, is outbreaks that happen. And obviously this pandemic is continuing, and COVID is around for a long time to come. Vaccinations kicking off now, but it's still going to be around for a little while. And the case in Brisbane over the last couple of weeks with their lockdown has really reminded people, I guess, that these things are still happening and these lockdowns are happening. Hopefully nothing happens and we're all clear by the time Gold Coast rocks around. But what kind of problem does that present if there's a lockdown and Supanova can't go ahead in one of the cities?
We just can't go ahead. I think the reality is that we have no control. So all we can do is plan to execute a fantastic event should we be allowed to do so. As we've seen with Brisbane previously, Adelaide previously, Perth previously, and now potentially Brisbane now, the lockdowns can come and go very quickly. And so even from what we heard this morning from the Queensland Premier, she was being quite positive if that the trajectory of what has been accomplished over the last 2 days is the same or thereabouts, then there won't be any lockdown beyond this weekend, beyond this week. So from that perspective, we literally just have to roll with the blows, and we're staying the course. We're still 2 weeks and 2 days away from the convention, so a lot can happen during that time. Even if should, heaven forbid, the lockdown be extended to include the Easter weekend, just to be on the safe side, according to government authorities, then that would still be nearly 1.5 weeks to go to Supanova. So, and again, I think the more people get held back from doing the things that they love, they then look to the next opportunity to do something that they love, and don't take it for granted as well. So the pre-sales for Supanova have been very encouraging so far. As we only put them on sale last Thursday, so but the pickup from the fans was very heartening, and we know we're going to get a good crowd at the event. To certain limitations, we can't sell as many tickets as we normally would, but there'll be enough of a buzz there to ensure that that our vendors are happy, and there's excitement there and everything as well. If we're able to run the show.
Fantastic, Daniel. Well, I'm so looking forward to Supanova again this year. We used to there was a period there where we used to fly around and catch up with Supanova through the country. Obviously, wasn't there last year. Our last convention appearance was the Star Trek Vegas convention back in 2019. So really looking forward to getting into Supanova this year, getting in there and